The conference hall floated in the void between stars, a massive structure built by the Galactic Council 3,000 years before humans learned to write. Inside its crystalline walls, representatives from 847 species gathered to witness what many considered a bureaucratic formality. The Galactic Threat Assessment Bureau was releasing its decennial review, a comprehensive ranking of every spacefaring civilization's military capability. Ambassador Marcus Webb sat in the human delegation's assigned seats, which were located in the upper tiers of the amphitheater. The placement itself told a story. The most powerful species occupied the floor level, close to the central podium. The Krythax Dominion held position 3. The Zephrani Collective sat at position 7. Humanity's seats were so high up that Webb needed to use his tablet's zoom function to see the speakers clearly. The chief assessor, a being that resembled a floating mass of bioluminescent tentacles, began reading the rankings. Its translator box rendered the musical tones of its native language into flat, clinical galactic standard. Position 791, species human. Classification class 5 minimal threat. Analog, harmless herbivore. Military capacity, negligible beyond defensive operations. Threat to galactic stability essentially 0. Laughter rippled through the chamber, not cruel laughter exactly, but the kind of amused chuckling one might give to a child's drawing of a spaceship. Webb felt his jaw tighten. Beside him, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen remained perfectly still, her face showing nothing. She had warned him this would happen, the assessor continued. Human civilization exhibits strong commercial instincts, robust cultural output, and admirable diplomatic flexibility. Their military forces are adequate for piracy suppression and minor territorial disputes. However, their fleet composition suggests no capacity for force projection beyond their immediate borders. Furthermore, their fractious political history and emphasis on individual rights makes coordinated military action unlikely. Assessment: suitable for trade partnerships and cultural exchange. Military threat minimal, more laughter. A Krythax delegate in the floor seats turned to look up at the humans, its 6 eyes glittering with what might have been amusement or contempt. Webb couldn't tell the difference with their species. The Krythax stood nearly 3 meters tall with chitinous armor plating and forearms that ended in claws capable of rending steel. Their species had conquered 47 worlds before joining the Council. They were warriors and they knew it. After the session ended, Webb made his way to the diplomatic reception. These events were supposed to foster goodwill and understanding between species. In practice, they were opportunities for the powerful to network and the weak to be ignored. Webb grabbed something that smelled vaguely like coffee and found a corner to occupy. Ambassador Webb. The voice came from behind him. He turned to find himself looking up at Warlord Krythax the Unyielding, one of the Dominion's senior military commanders. The Krythax wore ceremonial armor that gleamed under the artificial lights. "I wanted to speak with you about a matter of mutual interest." Webb kept his expression neutral. "Of course, Warlord. How can I help you? Help? No. The Krythax's translator box rendered what might have been a laugh. "I am here to help you. The Dominion has been reviewing our borders. We have noticed that several of your colonies are positioned in space that would be more efficiently utilized under our administration. Our colonies are quite efficiently run." "Thank you," Webb said. "Perhaps. But efficiency is relative, yes? Your species is new to the stars. Only 63 years since your first faster-than-light travel. Very young, very inexperienced." The Krythax leaned closer. "We are prepared to offer generous compensation for 5 of your outer worlds. New Harmony, Theta Station, Far Hope, Terra Nova, and Salvation. The residents would be relocated at our expense." Very generous terms. Webb felt cold spreading through his chest. Those 5 colonies represented nearly 8 million human lives. New Harmony alone had 2.3 million citizens. Those worlds are not for sale, Warlord. Everything is for sale, Ambassador. It is simply a matter of price. The Krythax straightened. The Dominion has authorized me to give humanity 30 standard days to consider our offer. We are patient. We understand you may need to consult with your various governments. Democracy is slow but thorough. We respect that. And if we decline, the Krythax made a gesture with its upper arms that the translator interpreted as a shrug. Then we would be forced to educate your species on the realities of galactic politics. Nothing personal, you understand. Simply the way things work. The strong expand, the weak accommodate. This is the natural order. Webb watched the Krythax walk away, joining a cluster of delegates near the center of the room. Several other species glanced at Webb, then quickly looked away. No one would intervene. Humanity had no allies here, not really. They had trading partners and cordial relationships. But when it came to standing against the third most powerful military in the galaxy, humanity stood alone. Back on Earth, Webb transmitted his report through quantum-entangled communication channels. The response took 6 hours, which was fast considering it required consensus from the United Earth Government, the Colonial Assembly, and the Defense Council. The answer was exactly what Webb expected. Refuse the Krythax demands, continue diplomatic efforts, and prepare contingencies. Lieutenant Commander Chen had already returned to Earth. She stood now in the Pentagon's Strategic Command Center, a facility buried 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around her, holographic displays showed the positions of every human ship, every colony's defensive capability, every asset humanity possessed in space. Admiral Thomas Reeves, commander of the United Earth Defense Force, studied the same displays with weathered eyes. He was 73 years old and had spent 50 of those years in uniform. They actually think we'll just hand over 5 worlds? They think we're harmless, sir, Chen replied. The assessment said so. Class 5 minimal threat. They looked at our diplomatic record, our trade networks, our small military presence in council space, and concluded we're not worth worrying about. Our diplomatic record exists because we chose diplomacy, Reeves said. Not because we're incapable of anything else. They don't see the difference. Chen pulled up a tactical assessment. The Krythax have never lost a war. They've been expanding for 300 years. Every species they've challenged has either capitulated or been crushed. From their perspective, we're just the next in line. Reeves nodded slowly. What's your assessment, Commander? Chen had been preparing this analysis since humanity joined the Galactic Council 15 years ago. She had always known this moment would come in one form or another. The galaxy operated on power dynamics and humanity was seen as weak. Someone would eventually test that assumption. If they attack, they'll start with New Harmony, she said. It's the most distant colony, easiest to isolate, and has the largest population. They'll want to make an example. Based on Krythax doctrine, they'll launch an overwhelming assault designed to terrify rather than annihilate. They want surrender, not genocide. Dead colonies can't be occupied. And our response? We activate Protocol Janus, sir. Chen pulled up another display, this one showing ship designs the Galactic Council had never seen. We show them what they missed in their assessment. Reeves was quiet for a long moment. Protocol Janus puts us on a war footing. Once we activate it, there's no going back. The galaxy will know we've been preparing for this. The galaxy will know we're not harmless, Chen corrected. There's a difference. The President will need to approve this. Yes, sir. The President did approve it, along with the Security Council, the Colonial Assembly, and every other governing body that needed to sign off. But they also tried diplomacy first. That was the human way. Ambassador Webb spent 3 weeks in negotiations with Krythax representatives. He offered trade concessions, technology sharing, joint development of disputed territories, and a dozen other compromises. The Krythax refused everything. They wanted the worlds, nothing less. It was a matter of prestige now. They had made their demand publicly. If they backed down, they would look weak. And the Krythax Dominion had not built an empire by looking weak. On the 28th day, Webb sent a final message to the Dominion. The United Earth Government and Colonial Assembly have reviewed your proposal. We respectfully decline. Our colonies are not for sale at any price. We remain open to diplomatic solutions that respect the sovereignty and self-determination of all human worlds. The response came within an hour. Your decision is noted. The Dominion will take appropriate action to secure its legitimate interests. This is regrettable but necessary. On the 30th day, the Krythax Third Fleet jumped into the New Harmony system. 67 warships, including 8 dreadnoughts and 23 heavy cruisers. It was enough firepower to sterilize a planet's surface. They had not come to negotiate. Admiral Krextal, commanding the Third Fleet from his flagship Eternal Triumph, broadcast a message on all frequencies. Attention, human colonists of New Harmony. The Krythax Dominion has claimed this world by right of superior force. You have 24 hours to begin evacuation procedures. Resistance will be met with overwhelming retaliation. Compliance will be rewarded with safe passage and generous resettlement compensation. Choose wisely. In his command center on New Harmony, Governor James Harding listened to the message with a grim expression. He was a former Marine, 62 years old, and had helped found this colony 18 years ago. Around him, his staff waited for orders. Send a message to Admiral Krextall, Harding said. Tell him that New Harmony is a sovereign human world and we will not abandon our homes. Tell him that if he attacks, he will pay a price he doesn't expect, and then activate the defense grid. Sir, the defense grid is just for pirates and— Do it, Harding interrupted, and get me a line to Earth. Tell them the Krythax are here, and we're not backing down. Across New Harmony's orbital space, satellites that the Krythax had dismissed as civilian infrastructure began to move. Power cores that had been running at 5% capacity surged to full output. Sensor arrays that appeared designed for weather monitoring and communication relay shifted frequency and resolution, becoming military-grade targeting systems. And hidden beneath the colony's surface, in bunkers that the Krythax intelligence had somehow missed, 2 million civilians began donning armor and checking weapons they had prayed they would never need to use. The Krythax fleet moved into position, confident and unhurried. They had done this before. They knew how it would end, but they were wrong. Admiral Krextall reviewed the tactical displays aboard the Eternal Triumph with satisfaction. The human colony's orbital infrastructure was exactly as intelligence had predicted. A handful of satellites, some basic defensive platforms probably capable of handling pirates, and a small civilian traffic control network. Nothing that could threaten a proper military fleet. The Krythax Third Fleet held position just outside weapons range, giving the humans their allotted 24 hours to see reason. On New Harmony's surface, Governor Harding watched the Krythax fleet through the command center's main display. The massive warships hung in space like sleeping giants, confident in their power. He thought about his daughter, who lived in the farming district with her 3 children. He thought about the 2 million other people who called this rock home. They had come here to build something new, to live free of Earth's crowded cities and ancient conflicts. Now war had found them anyway. Defense grid status, Harding asked. All weapon platforms online and tracking, sir, reported Commander Lisa Park, the colony's chief of security. We have 347 satellites active, kinetic interceptors loaded and ready, laser arrays charged, nuclear-pumped lacing packages deployed. They think we're civilians with pop guns, Harding muttered. Let them keep thinking that for 23 more hours. The Krythax had made a fundamental error in their assessment. They had looked at New Harmony's defenses and seen civilian infrastructure. They had not asked why a colony of 2 million people needed 300 satellites. They had not questioned why those satellites required such powerful reactors. They had not wondered why every adult colonist was required to complete 2 years of militia training. The Krythax saw what they expected to see: weak humans playing at civilization. Humanity had learned different lessons from history. Every generation carried the memories of wars that had nearly destroyed their species. They had learned that peace was precious, but survival required preparation. Every human colony built in the last 60 years had been constructed with a simple principle in mind. If war came, they would not die easily. The 24 hours passed. Admiral Krextall broadcast one final warning. Human colonists, your time has expired. Begin evacuation immediately, or we will commence demonstration strikes. You have 1 hour to comply. Governor Harding's response was brief. This is New Harmony. We are not leaving. If you attack, you will regret it. Krextall's laughter echoed through the bridge of the Eternal Triumph. His officers joined in. These humans were brave, he would grant them that. Foolish but brave. Target the capital city's outskirts. Demonstration strike only. Destroy the manufacturing district. Minimal casualties. Show them we are serious. 3 Krythax destroyers moved forward, their weapons charging. They launched a coordinated barrage of plasma missiles, enough to level several square kilometers. It was supposed to be overwhelming and terrifying. Instead, it became the first indication that something was very wrong. New Harmony's defense satellites activated in perfect synchronization. Kinetic interceptors screamed into space at velocities that should have been impossible for civilian hardware. Laser arrays that supposedly had ranges of a few hundred kilometers reached out across thousands and burned through missile casings. Nuclear-pumped lacing packages, weapons that the Krythax didn't even know humans possessed, detonated in precisely calculated patterns that created coherent energy beams of devastating power. Of the 47 missiles the Krythax launched, 43 were destroyed before they reached atmosphere. The remaining 4 got through, but their targeting systems had been scrambled by electronic warfare that the Krythax sensors couldn't even detect. They impacted an empty desert, 40 kilometers from the nearest settlement. On the Eternal Triumphs Bridge, silence replaced laughter. Krextel stared at the tactical display, trying to understand what had just happened. "Analysis," he barked. "Admiral, the human defensive network is far more capable than projected," his tactical officer reported, her voice uncertain. "Their satellites are military-grade, possibly exceeding our own technology in some areas. And they have weapon systems we didn't detect in preliminary scans. How is that possible?" "Our intelligence was wrong, sir," the tactical officer interrupted, which was a breach of protocol severe enough that Krextal would have reprimanded her under normal circumstances. But these were not normal circumstances. Krextal studied the human colony with new eyes. If their orbital defenses were this capable, what else had they hidden? No matter. The Third Fleet was still vastly superior in firepower. "All ships combat formation. Prepare for full assault. We will overwhelm their defenses through sheer weight of fire." The Krythax fleet advanced. 67 warships versus 300 satellites. On paper, it shouldn't have been a contest. But wars are not fought on paper. The satellites moved, and the Krythax realized with shock that they had been wrong about those too. These weren't fixed installations that could be easily targeted. They maneuvered with frightening agility, their trajectories calculated by artificial intelligence systems that adapted faster than Krythax gunners could track. When the fleet opened fire trying to clear the orbital space, half their shots missed entirely. And then the satellites returned fire. Lasers invisible in vacuum slashed across the darkness, targeting not the Krythax ship's thick armor, but their sensor arrays, communication antennas, and weapon tracking systems. Kinetic projectiles, nothing more than dense metal slugs accelerated to insane velocities, punched through shields designed to stop energy weapons. One destroyer took a kinetic hit that entered through its forward sensor array and exited through the engine compartment, tumbling the ship end over end. "They're targeting our systems, not our armor," Krextal's tactical officer shouted. "They're trying to blind us." "Then shoot them down before they succeed," Krextal roared. But the humans had learned from centuries of asymmetric warfare. They didn't fight the way the Krythax expected. They didn't try to match firepower with firepower. Instead, they exploited weaknesses, targeted critical systems, and used coordination that came from AI-assisted networks operating at speeds biological minds couldn't match. The battle raged for 6 hours. The Krythax destroyed 143 human satellites, but it cost them 3 destroyers completely disabled and 7 more heavily damaged. And then the ground-based defenses joined the fight. New Harmony's surface appeared to erupt. Hidden installations that had been camouflaged as mining operations revealed themselves as missile silos. What the Krythax had dismissed as communications towers were actually electromagnetic railguns, capable of launching projectiles into orbit. The planet's 3 moons, which seemed to host only scientific research stations, lit up with weapon signatures. They militarized their entire system, Krextal's executive officer said, his voice edged with something that might have been fear. "Every structure, every installation, it's all military." Krextal felt the first stirrings of doubt. This was not how the war was supposed to go. The humans were supposed to panic and surrender, not fight with calculated precision. But the Dominion had committed to this action. To withdraw now would be humiliation. And the Krythax did not accept humiliation. "Bring up the reserves," he ordered. "I want every ship in this fleet pressing the attack. Break their defenses and establish orbital superiority. Now." The Third Fleet threw everything at New Harmony. Plasma barrages that could melt continents. Kinetic bombardments that struck with nuclear force. Missile swarms that numbered in the thousands. For a terrifying hour, it looked like the sheer weight of fire would overwhelm the colony's defenses. But then Earth's response arrived. The UEDF had mobilized the moment the Krathax fleet jumped into New Harmony's system. Admiral Sarah Chen, now wearing the rank she had held in reserve for years, commanded humanity's first fleet from the bridge of the UED's Indomitable. The fleet numbered 42 ships less than the Krathax, but these were not the civilian-converted cargo haulers and light patrol. Craft the Galactic Council had catalogued the ships that emerged from faster than light. Travel in New Harmony's outer system were proper warships, built in hidden shipyards armed with weapons that humanity had spent 60 years perfecting. They had learned from every war their species had ever fought. They had studied every conflict, every strategy, every tactic that had ever been used to win against superior numbers. All ships stealth approach, Chen ordered. Use the debris field from the initial engagement as cover. Silent running until we reach optimal firing range. Target packages are uploaded. Fire on my command only. The human fleet moved like ghosts through the void. They had something the Krathax didn't expect. True stealth technology. Not invisibility, which was impossible, but heat management, emissions control, and hull coatings that made them nearly impossible to detect until they were exactly where they wanted to be. Admiral Krextal received the warning when the human fleet was already among his ships. Multiple contacts, close range. Admiral, we have hostile vessels in the formation. How did they get so close? Krextal demanded, but he already knew the answer. The humans had tricked them. Again. Chen's voice echoed across every Krathax communication channel. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. You attacked our colony. You killed our civilians. Now you pay the price. The UEDS Indomitable and its sister ships opened fire at ranges so close that shields were useless. Humanity had studied the Krathax for 15 years. They knew every weakness in their armor, every blind spot in their sensor coverage, every flaw in their shield geometry. The humans had learned from Trafalgar, from Midway, from every naval battle in their history. They understood that wars were won not through brute force but through superior tactics and targeting. Swarm drones, thousands of them, poured from the human ships like angry insects. Each drone was small and expendable, but they carried shaped charges designed to penetrate Krathax armor. The Krathax point defense systems tried to stop them, but there were too many, moving too fast, coordinating too well. Human destroyers, which the Krathax had thought were heavy cruisers based on their mass, revealed their true purpose. They were missile platforms carrying nuclear-pumped lacing warheads. When these missiles detonated, they didn't create explosions. They created focused beams of coherent energy that could slice through 3 ships in a single shot. The Battle of New Harmony turned from assault into nightmare. The Krathax Third Fleet was caught between the colony's defenses and Chen's fleet. They were being hit from 2 sides by an enemy that fought nothing like they expected. The humans used their smaller ships to herd Krathax vessels into kill zones. They sacrificed drones and missiles to create debris fields that blocked escape routes. They targeted engines and command bridges with surgical precision. After 36 hours of continuous combat, Admiral Krextal faced reality. His fleet had lost 42 ships destroyed and 17 more too damaged to fight. His casualties exceeded 78%. The humans had lost 9 ships and taken heavy damage to 14 more. By any standard of warfare, the Krathax had been routed. Signal retreat, Krextal said, his voice hollow. All ships withdraw to jump point. What remained of the Third Fleet limped away from New Harmony. The humans let them go. They could have pursued and annihilated the remainder, but they chose not to. Chen watched the Krathax retreat on her tactical display and felt only tired satisfaction. Message from Governor Harding, Admiral, her communications officer reported. He says thank you and welcome to New Harmony. Tell him we're glad to help, Chen replied. And tell him to prepare for more visitors. The galaxy is watching, and they just learned something new about humanity. On the Galactic Council's monitoring station, hundreds of species had indeed watched the entire battle. The emergency session convened within hours. The chamber that had laughed at humanity's ranking now buzzed with urgent, worried conversation. Ambassador Webb stood at the human delegation's podium, no longer seated in the upper tiers. The council had granted him floor access for this emergency session. He looked out at the assembled species and saw fear where there had been contempt. Esteemed members of the council, Webb began, you classified my species as harmless, as minimal threat. You were wrong, but not in the way you think. We are not harmless. We never were. But we chose peace because we know the cost of war. You mistook that choice for weakness. The Krythax made the same mistake, and they paid for it with blood. The chamber was silent. Webb continued. Humanity wants peace. We want trade, culture, cooperation. But we will not surrender our worlds to bullies. We will not bow to threats. And if you bring war to us, you will learn what centuries of human conflict have taught us. We know how to win wars. We just hoped we wouldn't have to prove it. Warlord Krythax the Unyielding, watching the broadcast from his homeworld, smashed his command console in rage. The Dominion had been humiliated. They had lost nearly an entire fleet to a species ranked 791st. This could not stand. This would not stand. He began issuing orders for total mobilization. If the humans wanted war, the Krythax Dominion would give them war. They would commit everything, hold nothing back, and crush this upstart species before they became a true threat. The warlord did not know that by making this decision, he had sealed his species' fate. The humans had shown mercy at New Harmony, allowing the survivors to retreat. They would not make that mistake again. The Krythax Dominion had never known defeat. For 300 years, they had expanded across 73 star systems, conquering 47 worlds and establishing themselves as the third most powerful military force in known space. Their doctrine was simple: overwhelming force applied without hesitation. It had never failed them. Until now. Warlord Krythax the Unyielding stood in the War Council chamber on the Dominion homeworld, surrounded by holographic displays showing the disaster at New Harmony. His fellow commanders watched the battle recordings in silence, watching their ships burn, watching their formation break, watching human vessels move with coordinated precision that seemed almost supernatural. This changes nothing, the warlord declared. We suffered a setback against an enemy who hid their true strength. Now we know what they have. Now we crush them properly. High Commander Velshar, the oldest and most experienced military leader in the Dominion, clicked his mandibles in a gesture that signaled doubt. With respect, warlord, perhaps we should reconsider our approach. The humans fought with tactics we have never encountered. Their technology exceeds our intelligence estimates. Perhaps negotiation. The warlord's voice could have cut steel. The Dominion does not negotiate from a position of weakness. We have 600 warships. The humans have perhaps 200 based on their response. We will commit 40% of our fleet. 600 ships against their entire military. We will overwhelm them through sheer numbers, and this time we will target military installations only. No more demonstration strikes. We hit them hard enough that they cannot recover. The War Council voted. Only Velshar abstained. Within a week, the largest fleet the Dominion had assembled in a century began gathering at their forward staging base. 600 warships, tens of thousands of soldiers, enough firepower to sterilize 20 planets. The Krythax would teach the humans their place in the galactic order. In the Pentagon's Strategic Command Center, Admiral Sarah Chen watched the Krythax mobilization through intelligence feeds provided by human reconnaissance drones. She had expected this. The Krythax were a warrior culture. They could not accept defeat. Pride would drive them to escalate, and pride would be their downfall. They're committing 600 ships, reported General Marcus Stone, head of Earth's Strategic Intelligence Division. That's 40% of their total military. They're betting everything on this. Good, Chen said. Let them commit. The more they send, the more we can destroy. Stone raised an eyebrow. You sound confident, Admiral. I am confident, General. Because we've been planning for this since the day we joined the Galactic Council. Chen pulled up a star map showing human territory. The Krythax think in terms of overwhelming force. They see war as a hammer striking an anvil. But humanity learned different lessons. We learned from Vietnam that superior firepower doesn't guarantee victory. We learned from Afghanistan that occupying hostile territory bleeds you dry. We learned from Poland that fortified positions can hold against impossible odds if the defenders are willing to fight. And which lesson do we teach the Krythax? Stone asked. All of them, Chen replied. We fight asymmetrically. We make them pay for every light year they advance. We turn their strengths into weaknesses. And we use something they don't have. Adaptive strategy. The human military had spent 6 decades preparing for this possibility. They had studied every major conflict in human history, and every species in the Galactic Council. They had built a military doctrine that borrowed from Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, Rommel, and Giap. They understood that wars were won not by matching your enemy's strengths, but by exploiting their weaknesses. The Krithax invasion began 3 weeks later. 600 warships jumped into human space across 12 entry points simultaneously. It was a massive, coordinated assault designed to overwhelm human defenses through sheer scale. Admiral Krextel, promoted despite his failure at New Harmony, commanded the central thrust toward Earth itself. But Earth was not the target the humans chose to defend most heavily. Chen had divided her forces strategically, placing the bulk of her fleet not at Earth but at 3 fortress worlds the humans called the Sentinel Stations: Thermopylae, Verdun, and Stalingrad. The names meant nothing to the Krithax. They would learn. Thermopylae was a moon orbiting a gas giant. It had a population of 300,000, mostly military personnel and their families. The Krithax Second Battle Group, 100 ships strong, jumped in system expecting to overwhelm the garrison and establish a forward base. Instead, they found themselves in a carefully prepared kill zone. Thermopylae's defenders had spent 15 years turning the entire system into a weapons platform. The gas giant itself had been seeded with remote-controlled fusion mines. The asteroid field contained disguised missile platforms. Even the station's architecture was designed for defense, with overlapping fields of fire and redundant command centers. Admiral Krextal received reports of the attack on Thermopylae with growing frustration. The second battle group was taking heavy casualties. The humans were using the terrain, using the natural features of the system to enhance their defensive advantages. Krithax ships found themselves navigating through minefields while under fire from platforms they couldn't locate. It was like fighting an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere. "They are making us bleed for every meter," Krextal's tactical officer reported. "The second battle group has lost 37 ships and hasn't even reached the moon." "Then have them withdraw and regroup," Krextal ordered. "We will bypass these fortress worlds and strike directly at their core systems." But that was exactly what the humans wanted. Chen's strategy was to force the Krithax to either commit massive resources to taking the fortress worlds or bypass them and leave their supply lines vulnerable. Either choice created opportunities for human counterattack. The Krithax chose to bypass. They would let the fortress worlds sit in isolation while the main fleet drove toward Earth. It was sound logic, except for one problem. The humans had no intention of letting Krithax supply lines operate unmolested. Human raiders, small ships crewed by volunteers, began hitting Krithax logistics convoys. They used hit-and-run tactics, striking fast and disappearing before the Krithax could respond. They targeted fuel depots, ammunition ships, and repair facilities. Each raid was small, but together they began to add up. The Krithax fleet found itself constantly short of supplies, constantly repairing damage, constantly looking over its shoulder. At Verdun Station, another fortress world, the Krithax committed 200 ships to take the position. The battle lasted 3 months. The humans used every trick they knew: minefields, remote drones, cyber warfare, and psychological operations. They broadcast messages to Krithax ships detailing their casualties, telling them how many of their comrades had died, asking if this war was worth it. The Krithax took Verdun eventually, but it cost them 130 ships. They captured a station that had been systematically destroyed before evacuation. They gained nothing but rubble and the graves of their soldiers. Meanwhile, at Stalingrad Station, the third fortress world, something remarkable happened. The Krithax fleet arrived expecting another grinding siege. Instead, they found the station apparently defenseless. Confused but opportunistic, they moved in to occupy. It was a trap. The station had been evacuated, but it had also been rigged as a massive bomb. When the Krithax fleet entered close orbit, human engineers detonated the station's power core. The explosion was equivalent to a 50-megaton nuclear device. 43 Krithax ships vanished in an instant. The rest were damaged by the blast wave or debris. The humans had sacrificed one of their own stations to destroy nearly a fifth of an entire battle group. The Krithax War Council watched their invasion stall. They had committed 600 ships. They had lost nearly 300. And they had captured exactly 2 systems, one of which was empty rubble. Meanwhile, their economy was straining under the weight of military mobilization. The Dominion's empire was built on conquest and tribute. Extended wars of attrition were not something their system was designed to handle. "We need to end this quickly," High Commander Velshar said during an emergency council meeting. "Our losses are unsustainable. The humans are bleeding us dry." "Then we escalate," Warlord Krithax the Unyielding responded. We have weapons we have not used. Strategic weapons. The chamber fell silent. Strategic weapons meant planet killers, weapons that could render worlds uninhabitable. Their use was technically prohibited by Galactic Council law, but the Dominion had never cared much for Council law when their interests were at stake. If we use such weapons, the Council will intervene, Velshar warned. Other species will see us as a threat. We could face a coalition against us. The Council is weak, the warlord said. They fear us. They will condemn our actions in words but do nothing, and once we break the humans, no one will dare challenge us again. We will show the galaxy what happens to those who defy the Dominion. The vote was close, but the War Council authorized the use of strategic weapons. A planet killer was moved into position near the human colony World of Freedom's Hope. The world had 800,000 inhabitants. The Krythax broadcast their intention on all frequencies, giving the colonists 72 hours to evacuate. It was a terror weapon designed to break human morale. But while the Krythax positioned their planet killer, human special forces completed an operation they had been working on for months. A team of 12 operators, specialists in infiltration and sabotage, had spent 6 months working their way into the Krythax industrial heartland. They had studied, they had waited, and they had planned. The planet killer weapon was powered by a zero-point energy generator, a piece of technology the Krythax had acquired from another species centuries ago. It was powerful, but it was also volatile. The human team had learned this through careful intelligence gathering. They had learned how it worked, and they had learned how to make it fail catastrophically. Lieutenant James Keller led the team. He was 28 years old, had grown up on Mars, and had volunteered for this mission knowing he probably wouldn't come back. His team infiltrated the facility housing the generator through a maintenance tunnel. They moved through sections that should have been guarded but weren't, because the Krythax had grown complacent in their own territory. They reached the generator chamber with 47 minutes before the weapon was scheduled to fire. Keller's demolitions expert, Sergeant Maria Reeves, placed shaped charges around the containment field generators, not to destroy them but to cause a specific failure cascade. The zero-point generator would lose containment, but instead of simply exploding, it would create a runaway reaction that would consume everything within 1,000 kilometers. The team made it 300 meters from the facility before the charges detonated. Keller activated his helmet recorder. Mission successful. Generator containment compromised. To whoever finds this recording, tell my mom I'm sorry I couldn't make it home. The zero-point generator failed exactly as Reeves had calculated. The resulting explosion destroyed the Krythax industrial hub of Kreshnar Prime. 4.7 billion citizens died instantly. 60% of the Dominion's shipbuilding capacity vanished. Their ammunition factories, their equipment manufacturing, their research facilities, all gone in a flash of uncontained energy. The planet killer weapon, positioned to destroy Freedom's Hope, never fired. It ceased to exist along with everything else in that system. The Krythax Dominion reeled. In a single moment, they had lost more than they had in 300 years of warfare. Their military machine, which had seemed unstoppable, suddenly had no capacity to replace losses. Ships already in the field would get no reinforcements, no repairs, no resupply. Warlord Krythax the Unyielding stood in the ruins of his War Council chamber on the homeworld. The explosion had been visible in their night sky, a brief new star that marked the death of billions. Around him, his commanders were in shock. Some were weeping. Others simply stared into nothing. They destroyed an entire world, someone whispered. How did they do it? High Commander Velshar, who had warned against escalation, spoke quietly. We underestimated them. We thought because they chose peace they were weak. We were wrong. The humans know how to make war. They have always known, they just hoped they wouldn't have to show us. On Earth, Admiral Chen received the report of Kreshnar Prime's destruction with mixed feelings. 4.7 billion people dead, even enemy civilians, was a weight on her soul. But Lieutenant Keller and his team had saved 800,000 human lives and probably shortened the war by years. The Krythax will want vengeance, General Stone said. The Krythax no longer have the capacity for vengeance, Chen replied. They've lost 40% of their military and 60% of their industrial base. They can't sustain this war any longer. Now we make them an offer. Surrender or we finish what they started. The message was sent through official channels. The Krythax Dominion had 72 hours to respond. They could accept terms of surrender, or humanity would prosecute the war to its conclusion. There would be no third option. The Galactic Council watched all of this with growing horror. The species they had ranked as harmless had just destroyed one of the galaxy's major powers in 6 months. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that should not have been possible for such a young species. More importantly, they had shown they understood the true nature of warfare. Victory goes not to the strongest, but to the most adaptable, most ruthless, and most willing to pay the price. Ambassador Webb appeared before the council again. This time no one left. No one looked away. They listened as Webb delivered a simple message. The Krythax brought this war to us. We tried diplomacy, we offered compromise. They chose violence. So we gave them violence, and they learned that humanity has had millennia to perfect that particular art. We don't want to be warriors. We want to be builders, traders, artists, explorers. But if you make us fight, we will win. Remember that. The Krythax had 72 hours to decide their fate. They would choose surrender. They had no other option left. Warlord Krythax the Unyielding stood before the assembled leadership of the Dominion in their emergency council chamber. The room was deep underground, protected by meters of reinforced armor because the Krythax had learned that nowhere was truly safe from human weapons. Outside, the population of their homeworld waited in fear. Inside, the architects of their civilization's greatest disaster tried to decide what came next. We cannot surrender, the warlord said, though his voice lacked its former conviction. The Dominion has never surrendered. Not in 300 years. If we bow to these humans, we show weakness. Every species we have conquered will see it. Rebellions will spread. Our empire will collapse. High Commander Velshar looked at his old rival with something approaching pity. Our empire is already collapsing, old friend. We have lost 300 ships. Kreshnar Prime is gone. Our industrial capacity is shattered. We cannot build new ships. We cannot repair the ones we have. And the humans are still out there waiting for our answer. Then we fight with what we have, the warlord insisted. We rally our forces. We strike at Earth itself. If we can decapitate their leadership, show them they are not invincible. We already tried that, interrupted Admiral Krextall, who had barely survived 3 separate engagements with human forces. We sent 200 ships toward Earth. The humans destroyed 73 of them before we got within sensor range of their inner system. They have defensive networks we cannot penetrate. They have weapons we cannot counter. And they fight like they can see the future, anticipating every move we make. It was true. The Krythax had learned that fighting humans was unlike fighting any other species. The humans adapted. Every tactic the Krythax tried worked once, maybe twice, then the humans found a counter. Every weapon the Krythax deployed, the humans analyzed and defeated. It was as if the humans had studied warfare itself as a science, learning every possible variation, every possible response. And in a sense, they had. Humanity's military academies taught the lessons of 5,000 years of warfare. Every cadet studied not just their victories, but their defeats. They learned from the Romans and the Mongols, from Napoleon and Sherman, from Rommel and Yamamoto. They understood that war was about adaptation, logistics, morale, and intelligence as much as it was about weapons. The Krythax War Council debated through the night. Some argued for surrender. Others demanded they fight to the end, taking as many humans with them as possible. But slowly, inevitably, reality imposed itself. The Dominion could not win this war. The only question was how much more they would lose before accepting that truth. As dawn broke over the Krythax homeworld, High Commander Velshar made the decision that would define the rest of his life. I am assuming command of the Dominion's military forces. Warlord Krythax the Unyielding is hereby removed from authority for incompetence and dereliction of duty. Anyone who objects may challenge me. The warlord stood, his forearms reaching for weapons, but no one moved to support him. His officers, his subordinates, the warriors who had followed him for decades all remained still. They had watched him lead their civilization to ruin. They would not follow him to extinction. Velshar continued, I am authorizing contact with the human military. We will discuss terms of surrender. May our ancestors forgive us. The message reached Admiral Chen 6 hours later. The Krythax were ready to discuss terms. Chen convened her command staff to determine what those terms would be. This was delicate. Demand too much, and the Krythax might fight to the death out of desperation. Demand too little, and they might rebuild and try again in a generation. We need them demilitarized, said General Stone. Their fleet reduced to system defense only. No dreadnoughts, no carriers, no power projection capability. We need reparations, added Finance Minister Helene Torres, attending via hologram. This war cost us 8 trillion credits and 7 million dead. They need to pay. We need accountability, said Ambassador Webb, also attending remotely from the Galactic Council. War crime tribunals for those who ordered attacks on civilian populations. Justice for our dead. Chen listened to them all, then made her decision. We will demand complete demilitarization except for basic system defense forces. They will cede border territories that threatened our colonies, including the systems they originally demanded from us. They will pay reparations over 50 years, enough to rebuild our losses, but not so much it destroys their economy. And yes, we will have tribunals for war criminals, but we will not occupy their worlds, and we will not humiliate them beyond what is necessary. A humiliated enemy becomes a desperate enemy, and desperate enemies do terrible things. The terms were transmitted to High Commander Velshar. He read them in silence, then looked at his staff. These are harsh terms, but they could have been far worse. The humans could have demanded unconditional surrender. They could have occupied our worlds. They could have done to our homeworld what we lost at Kreshnar Prime. Instead, they offer us a chance to survive. I recommend we accept. The Dominion civilian government, what was left of it, voted to accept the terms. 3 days later, representatives from both sides met on a neutral station provided by the Galactic Council. High Commander Velshar signed the surrender documents with all 4 hands. Admiral Chen signed for humanity. Ambassador Webb witnessed. The formal ceremony was brief and dignified. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic moments. Just 2 civilizations ending a war that should never have started. As Velshar left the signing room, he paused near Chen. I must know, he said. How did you do it? How did a species ranked 791st defeat the 3rd most powerful military in the galaxy? Chen considered her answer carefully. Because you looked at our diplomatic record and saw weakness. We looked at our history and saw lessons. You thought 300 years of victory made you invincible. We knew that 5,000 years of warfare taught us that no one is invincible. You expected us to fight like you. We fought like ourselves. Will you tell me the truth about something else? Velshar asked. Kreshnar Prime, the destruction of our industrial world. Was it truly an accident? Your commandos sabotaging our weapon? Yes, Chen said. They sabotaged your planet killer to save one of our colonies. The 0-point generator failure was a calculated risk. Lieutenant Keller and his team knew it would be catastrophic. They did it anyway. 4.7 billion dead to save 800,000, Velshar said. That is a terrible calculus. War is terrible calculus, Chen replied. That's why we tried to avoid it. But you started it and we finished it. That's all there is to say. The surrender of the Krithax Dominion sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. Species that had dismissed humanity as harmless now scrambled to reassess. Military analysts pored over the battle recordings, trying to understand how the humans had achieved such decisive victories. Diplomatic corps rushed to establish better relations with Earth. The Galactic Threat Assessment Bureau convened an emergency session to re-rank humanity. The debate lasted 3 days. Some argued for placing humanity in the top 10. Others insisted they belonged in the top 5. A few radical voices suggested humanity might be the single most dangerous species in known space, not because of their technology, but because of their adaptability and their understanding of warfare itself. The final ranking was announced in the same amphitheater where, less than a year ago, humanity had been called harmless. This time, Ambassador Webb sat on the floor level, in the front row where the most powerful species resided. The chief assessor, the same floating mass of tentacles that had delivered the previous assessment, seemed subdued as it read the new classification. Species human, new ranking, Class 1 extreme threat, analog apex predator, military capacity, extensive with capabilities exceeding initial assessment by orders of magnitude, threat to galactic stability, extreme, diplomatic status recommended for priority engagement and alliance consideration. There was no laughter this time. Only silence, and Webb thought a certain amount of fear. In the weeks following the surrender, the true cost of the war became clear. The Krithax had lost 390 warships, 65% of their entire military. Their industrial capacity was reduced to 35% of pre-war levels. Kreshnar Prime, their manufacturing hub, was a dead system that would take centuries to recover if it ever did. Nearly 5 billion Krythax civilians were dead or missing. The Dominion, once the third most powerful civilization in the galaxy, had been reduced to a second-rate power that would spend decades recovering. Humanity had lost 47 warships and 7 million dead, most of them civilians killed in the initial Krythax attacks. The cost was terrible, but compared to the Krythax losses, humanity had won decisively. But Admiral Chen took no pleasure in victory. She visited the memorial being constructed on New Harmony, where the war had started. The monument would list every human who died in the conflict. 7 million names, 7 million people who had wanted nothing more than to live their lives in peace. Governor Harding, who had held New Harmony against the initial assault, stood beside her. Was it worth it, he asked. I don't know, Chen admitted. We survived. We secured our future. But the cost? She trailed off, looking at the names being carved into stone. They forced us to fight, Harding said. That's what I tell myself at night when I can't sleep. They attacked us. We defended ourselves. We did what we had to do. But we did more than defend, Chen said quietly. We destroyed them. Utterly. Completely, we made an example of them. Now the galaxy fears us, and I'm not sure that's better than being dismissed as harmless. It's better than being conquered, Harding replied. It's better than seeing our children enslaved or our worlds burned. We chose to be strong because the alternative was extinction. That's not a choice I regret. Chen nodded slowly. She understood his point, but the weight of command meant understanding the broader implications. Humanity had proven itself capable of terrible violence. That would change how other species saw them. Some would seek alliance. Others would prepare for conflict. And some, inevitably, would decide that humanity was too dangerous to exist and would have to be eliminated before they became unstoppable. The war with the Krythax was over, but Chen suspected it was only the first of many challenges humanity would face now that the galaxy knew the truth. They were not harmless. They were predators who had chosen to be peaceful, and predators once provoked were very hard to stop. Back in the Krythax Dominion, Warlord Krythax the Unyielding sat in a cell awaiting trial for war crimes. He had started a war out of arrogance and pride, believing that humans were weak and easily conquered. He had gambled his civilization's future on that assumption, and he had paid with planets. Through his cell's small window he could see the night sky. Somewhere out there, beyond his sight, was the dead system where Kreshinar Prime had been. 4.7 billion ghosts. An entire world erased because he had thought humans were harmless. He had learned the truth too late. Humans were not harmless. They were dangerous precisely because they understood the cost of violence and chose peace anyway. But when forced to fight, they fought with the accumulated knowledge of a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of war. The Krythax had challenged humanity. They had demanded surrender. They had attacked without mercy. And they had paid with planets, blood, and the pride of a warrior culture that would never recover from the defeat. The lesson was clear, carved in fire and blood across multiple star systems. Do not mistake humanity's choice of peace for inability to wage war. The galaxy had learned this lesson. Some would remember it. Others would forget and have to learn it again. But humanity would remain vigilant and ready, hoping for peace but prepared for war. 6 months after the surrender, Ambassador Marcus Webb walked through the halls of the Galactic Council complex with a security detail he hadn't needed before the war. Other delegates moved aside as he passed, some nodding respectfully, others averting their eyes. The change in behavior was remarkable. Before the war, Webb had to chase down other ambassadors for brief conversations. Now they sought him out, requesting meetings, proposing alliances, offering trade deals that heavily favored humanity. Fear, Webb realized, was a powerful diplomatic tool. He wasn't sure he liked wielding it. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called to formally reclassify humanity's threat rating and to address the broader implications of the Krythax defeat. 847 species sent representatives. The chamber was full, which was unusual. Most routine sessions saw perhaps half attendance. But this was not routine. This was the galaxy trying to understand what humanity's victory meant for the established order. Webb took his position on the floor level, in a seat previously occupied by the Krythax delegation. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. The Krythax now sat in the upper tiers, their reduced status physically manifest in the architecture of the chamber. The chief assessor floated to the central podium, its bioluminescent tentacles pulsing with colors that Webb's translator interpreted as nervous energy. Esteemed members of the council, we convene to address the recalculation of humanity's threat assessment and to discuss the ramifications of recent events. As you are aware, humanity, previously ranked 791st, has been provisionally reclassified as Class 1 extreme threat. This session will determine if that classification is appropriate and what diplomatic protocols should follow. A representative from the Zafrani Collective, ranked 7th in one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, rose to speak. The Zafrani were energy beings, appearing as vaguely humanoid shapes made of contained plasma. With respect, Chief Assessor, the question is not whether humanity is dangerous. They have proven that conclusively. The question is whether they are a threat to galactic stability. There is a difference between capability and intent. The Krythax found no difference, called out a delegate from the lower tiers. This prompted murmurs of agreement from various species. Webb decided it was time to address the chamber. He stood and silence fell. "May I speak, Chief Assessor?" "Ambassador Webb, you have the floor." Webb walked to the speaking platform, very aware that hundreds of species were watching, calculating, judging. "Honored delegates, I understand your concern. You have seen what happens when someone attacks humanity. You have seen the Krythax dominion reduced from a major power to a shell of its former strength. And you are wondering if you might be next." He paused, letting that sink in. "Let me be very clear about something. Humanity did not want this war. We tried every possible diplomatic solution. We offered compromises, concessions, and peaceful alternatives. The Krythax refused them all and attacked one of our colonies. They killed 200,000 civilians in their first strike. What followed was not aggression. It was defense. Defense that destroyed an entire world," called out someone from the upper tiers. Webb couldn't identify the species. "Yes," Webb acknowledged. "Defense that destroyed Kreshinar Prime. 4.7 billion dead. I won't minimize that tragedy. But let me explain how that happened. Because I think there is confusion about our capabilities and our intentions." Webb pulled up holographic displays, showing the planet-killer weapon the Krythax had positioned near Freedom's Hope. The Krythax moved this weapon into position to destroy one of our colonies. 800,000 people lived on Freedom's Hope. The Krythax gave them 72 hours to evacuate, which sounds merciful until you realize that evacuating 800,000 people takes weeks, not days. It was a death sentence disguised as an ultimatum. The chamber was silent as Webb continued. "We had a special forces team that had infiltrated Krythax space. They sabotaged the weapon's power source. The resulting explosion was catastrophic, far beyond what we intended. But make no mistake, we made a choice. We chose to save 800,000 of our people, at the cost of billions of theirs. That is war. That is the terrible mathematics that nations must calculate when survival is at stake." "And you expect us to believe you regret this?" asked the Zafrani representative. "I expect you to believe that we understand the cost," Webb replied. "Every human leader who authorized that mission knows they are responsible for billions of deaths. That weight will be with them forever. But they made the calculation that protecting our people required extreme action. Would any of you have chosen differently if it were your people threatened?" The silence that followed suggested that many delegates understood, even if they didn't want to admit it. Webb changed his approach. "You are trying to calculate whether humanity is a threat to you, whether we will use our military capability to expand, to conquer, to dominate. So let me tell you about human history. And maybe you will understand why we fight the way we do." He pulled up images from Earth. Ancient battlefields, medieval sieges, industrial age trenches, nuclear explosions. Humanity nearly destroyed itself a dozen times. We fought wars that killed millions, then tens of millions, then hundreds of millions. We developed weapons that could sterilize our planet in hours, and we came very close to using them. Do you know what stopped us? Webb looked around the chamber. Fear. Not fear of our enemies, but fear of ourselves. We looked at what we had become and realized that if we continued on that path, there would be no humanity left to fight for. So we made a choice. We chose to direct our energies toward exploration, toward building, toward peace, not because we couldn't fight anymore, but because we understood the cost of fighting. That makes you more dangerous, not less, observed the Zafrani representative. A species that knows how to destroy itself and chooses not to has discipline. Discipline can be redirected toward conquest. It could be, Webb agreed. But it isn't. Look at our record. 60 years in space. And how many unprovoked conflicts have we initiated? 0. How many planets have we tried to conquer? 0. How many trade disputes have we resolved through violence? 0. We have been exactly what we claim to be. A peaceful species interested in commerce and cultural exchange. Until you weren't, someone called out. Until we were attacked, Webb corrected. There is a difference between choosing peace and being incapable of war. We are capable of war. We proved that. But we prefer peace. We will always prefer peace. Because we know what war costs in a way that most of you don't. Admiral Sarah Chen, attending the session as a military observer, watched Webb's performance with approval. He was threading a difficult needle, acknowledging humanity's capability while reassuring the galaxy that Earth wasn't planning to become the next conquest-driven empire. It was delicate work. A delegate from the Confederation of United Systems, a mid-tier power, stood to speak. Ambassador Webb, you say humanity prefers peace, but your military capability suggests you have been preparing for war since you entered the galactic community. How do we reconcile those two statements? Webb smiled slightly. By understanding that those who want peace must prepare for war. It's an old human saying. We entered the galactic community and saw how it operated. Power matters. Military strength matters. Species without strength are ignored or conquered. So we built strength while pursuing peace. We hoped we would never need to use our military. But we refused to be helpless. And now you have proven you are not helpless, said the Zafrani representative. Which brings us back to the original question. What do you intend to do with this power? Webb took a deep breath. This was the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations. We intend to do exactly what we have always intended to do. We will defend our people. We will honor our commitments. We will engage in fair trade. We will share our culture and learn from yours. We will contribute to the Galactic Council and respect its laws. And we will offer alliance to those who want partnership based on mutual respect. He paused, then continued with steel in his voice. But we will not tolerate threats. We will not surrender our sovereignty to bullies. And if another species makes the same mistake the Krythax made, they will learn the same lesson. We are not harmless. We never were. We simply chose to give peace a chance. That choice remains. But it is a choice, not a weakness. The Galactic Council debated for 3 more days. Various species proposed different classifications for humanity. Some wanted economic sanctions to limit human military growth. Others proposed treaties that would restrict human expansion. Still others suggested that humanity should be offered a permanent seat on the Council's Security Committee, recognizing their power while binding them to institutional constraints. In the end, the vote was decisive. Humanity was confirmed as Class 1 extreme threat, with a notation that diplomatic engagement was strongly recommended. No sanctions were imposed. No restrictions were placed on human expansion, and humanity was offered and accepted a seat on the Security Committee. The Krythax Dominion, meanwhile, faced a very different future. War crime tribunals began on a neutral world, with judges selected from species that had remained neutral during the conflict. Warlord Krythax the Unyielding was tried for initiating an aggressive war, and for ordering attacks on civilian populations. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. High Commander Velshar testified against his former superior. He wanted glory. He wanted conquest. He looked at humanity's preference for peace and saw weakness. I warned him. I told him we did not understand the humans. He ignored me, and our civilization paid the price. Warlord Krythax the Unyielding was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. 17 other senior Krythax commanders faced similar trials. Some were acquitted. Most were convicted. The message was clear. Aggressive war would have consequences, but the trials were not just about punishment. They were about establishing precedent. The Galactic Council had never seriously enforced rules against aggressive war before. Powerful species did what they wanted, and weaker species accepted it. The Krythax trials changed that calculus. If the Dominion could be held accountable, anyone could be held accountable. In the years following the war, humanity's position in the galaxy transformed. Species that had ignored Earth now sought trade agreements. Military alliances were proposed and selectively accepted. Human technology, particularly in defense systems and tactical AI, became highly sought after. But not everyone was pleased with humanity's rise. Some species viewed humans as dangerous upstarts who had gotten lucky against an overconfident enemy. Others worried that humanity was too powerful, too unpredictable, too young to wield such influence responsibly. Whispered conversations in diplomatic corridors suggested that perhaps something should be done about the human problem before they became unstoppable. Admiral Chen was very aware of these undercurrents. She stood in her office in the Pentagon, looking at intelligence reports from across the galaxy. 3 separate species were quietly increasing their military budgets. 2 more were engaged in secret military research that violated Council agreements. And at least one, the Nexian hegemony, was actively recruiting allies for what their internal communications called containment of human expansion. "They're scared of us," General Stone said, reviewing the same reports. "And scared people do dangerous things. They should be scared," Chen replied. "We showed them we're capable of winning wars they thought we couldn't fight. But fear cuts both ways. They might decide that the safest course is to eliminate the threat before it grows stronger." "You think we'll face another war?" "I think we'll face many wars," Chen said. "Not all at once, probably. But there are species out there who learned the wrong lesson from our conflict with the Krythax. They think we're a threat that needs to be eliminated. Others think we can be manipulated or used as a weapon against their rivals. And some just want to test us to see if we were lucky or truly dangerous. What do we do about it?" "We do what we've always done," Chen said. "We prepare. We build alliances with species we can trust. We maintain our military edge. And we hope that our reputation is enough to deter most conflicts before they start. But we stay ready. Because peace is not the absence of capability. It's the choice to use capability wisely." Ambassador Webb, returning to Earth for consultations, met with President Elena Vasquez in the White House. The president, elected on a platform of diplomatic engagement, had been forced to become a wartime leader. She looked older than she had a year ago. "The galaxy will never see us the same way," Vasquez said. "We can't go back to being dismissed as harmless. That door is closed." "No, we can't," Webb agreed. "But we can choose what we become next. We can become an empire, using our military strength to expand and dominate. Some species expect that, some might even submit to it, or we can remain what we claim to be, a peaceful civilization that happens to be very good at defending itself." "The second option is harder," Vasquez observed. "It requires constant restraint. It requires us to help our enemies rebuild, to show mercy when vengeance would be easier, to keep our word even when breaking it would be profitable." "Yes," Webb said, "but that's the choice that defines us. The Krythax thought we were weak because we chose peace. They learned we were dangerous. Now we have to prove that we're wise, that we can be powerful without being tyrannical, that we can win wars without becoming the monsters we fight against." The president nodded slowly. "I've authorized rebuilding aid for the Krythax Dominion. Medical supplies, industrial equipment, food shipments. Nothing military, but enough to help them recover. Some members of Congress are furious. They say we should let the Krythax suffer for what they did." "Those members of Congress have never read the Marshall Plan," Webb said, referring to America's rebuilding of Europe after World War II. "Sometimes the wisest thing you can do after defeating an enemy is help them recover. It turns enemies into allies. It shows strength of a different kind." "I hope you're right," Vasquez said, "because we're betting our future on the idea that we can be strong and merciful at the same time. That's a rare combination in galactic politics." A year after the war's end, a ceremony was held on New Harmony. The planet had been rebuilt, its scars healed as much as possible. A memorial stood where the first Krythax assault had struck, listing the names of those killed in the war. 200,000 civilians, 5 million military personnel, 7 million humans who would never go home. Admiral Chen stood at the memorial with Governor Harding and other survivors of the battle. Representatives from 43 species attended, including, surprisingly, High Commander Velshar of the Krythax Dominion. The Krythax commander approached Chen after the ceremony. "Admiral, I wanted to speak with you before I leave." "High Commander," Chen acknowledged. "I have been wondering something since the war ended," Velshar said. "At New Harmony, when our fleet retreated, you did not pursue. You could have destroyed us all. Why did you let us go?" Chen considered her answer. "Because dead enemies can't learn lessons. I wanted survivors who would return to your people and explain what happened. I wanted your military to understand that we could have annihilated you but chose not to. Mercy, strategically applied, is sometimes more effective than slaughter. You think very carefully about these things, Velshar observed. We have to, Chen said. We know what we're capable of. That knowledge requires responsibility. We could have burned your worlds after Kreshnar Prime. We could have demanded unconditional surrender and occupied your territory. We could have humiliated your species beyond recovery. But what would that accomplish? It would create an enemy that would spend centuries planning revenge. Better to defeat you decisively than offer a path to peace. Your species is strange, Velshar said. Dangerous and merciful at the same time. I do not fully understand you. Neither do we sometimes, Chen admitted. We're full of contradictions. We're capable of great violence and great compassion. We build weapons that can destroy planets and hospitals that save lives. We're predators who choose to be civilized. Maybe that's what makes us human. Velshar made a gesture with his upper arms that Chen's translator interpreted as a bow. I return to my people to help rebuild what my warlord destroyed. Perhaps someday the Krythax will understand humans better. Perhaps we will even become allies. But for now I will settle for being grateful enemies. You had the power to exterminate us. You chose not to. That is a debt we will not forget. As Velshar left, Governor Harding joined Chen at the memorial. Do you think he's sincere? Or is this just politics? Both, probably, Chen said. He's a soldier. He understands what we did to his military. He respects strength. But he's also pragmatic. He knows the Dominion needs human aid to recover. Time will tell if gratitude becomes genuine friendship or if it's just necessity. And the rest of the galaxy? Chen looked up at the stars visible in New Harmony's afternoon sky. Somewhere out there, 800 species were recalculating their positions, their strategies, their assessments of humanity. The rest of the galaxy is learning that we're not what they thought. Some will adjust, others will test us. A few will try to destroy us, but they'll all remember what happened to the Krythax. Good, Harding said. Let them remember. Let them know that if they come for us, they'll pay with planets. Chen didn't respond to that. She understood the sentiment, but she hoped it wouldn't come to that again. One war was enough. The weight of 7 million dead was enough. She wanted humanity to be remembered for what they built, not what they destroyed. But if destruction was necessary for survival, humanity would not hesitate. That was the lesson. That was what the galaxy needed to understand. 3 years after the war, the Galactic Threat Assessment Bureau released an updated profile on humanity. Ambassador Webb read it in his office, noting the changes from the initial assessment that had started everything. Species, human. Classification, Class 1 extreme threat. Analog, apex predator with cooperative social structure. Military capacity extensive. Demonstrated capability includes advanced defensive networks, adaptive tactical doctrine, strategic weapons deployment, and special operations at unprecedented effectiveness. Technological sophistication, high and improving rapidly. Cultural assessment complex. Humans demonstrate strong preference for peaceful solutions, but possess both capability and willingness to engage in total warfare when threatened. Threat to galactic stability, potentially extreme if provoked, potentially stabilizing if engaged diplomatically. The report continued with detailed analysis, but one paragraph caught Webb's attention. Historical note. Previous assessment based on observed diplomatic behavior and assumed correlation between peaceful conduct and limited military capability. Updated assessment recognizes that humanity's choice of peace was strategic preference, not capability limitation. Species exhibits extreme disparity between diplomatic preference and combat effectiveness. Other species should not confuse humanity's desire for peace with inability to wage war. The Krythax Dominion made this error and suffered catastrophic consequences. Webb smiled grimly. They had finally understood. It had taken a war and millions of deaths, but the galaxy now knew the truth about humanity. They were not harmless. They had never been harmless. They were dangerous, disciplined, and determined to survive. But they were also willing to extend friendship, to trade fairly, to honor agreements, and to help even former enemies rebuild. That combination of strength and restraint was what Webb hoped would define humanity's role in the galaxy. Not conquerors, but not victims either. Partners to those who wanted partnership, allies to those who needed allies, and an implacable enemy to those who chose to become enemies. A message arrived on Webb's terminal. It was from Admiral Chen, now retired from active service but serving as an advisor to the Defense Council. The message was brief. They're starting to form alliances specifically to check human expansion. 3 species so far, possibly more. We knew this would happen. The question is what we do about it. Webb typed his response. We do what we always do. We offer them partnership instead of conflict. We show them that cooperation benefits everyone more than confrontation. And if they still choose confrontation, we make sure we win decisively enough that others think twice before trying the same thing. It was a delicate balance, walking the line between strength and aggression, between defense and expansion, between being feared and being respected. But humanity had been walking difficult lines for millennia. They would find a way. On Earth, in a classroom in Chicago, a teacher stood before 30 students learning galactic history. She pulled up images of the Krythax War, as it was now called in human records. Why did the Krythax attack us? Asked a student. The teacher considered her answer carefully. Because they thought we were weak. Because they looked at our choices and assumed we couldn't fight. Because they made the mistake of thinking that peace-loving means helpless. But we won, another student said. We're stronger than them. We were better prepared, the teacher corrected. Strength isn't just about weapons and ships. It's about understanding, adaptation, and being willing to do what's necessary. The Krythax were strong, but they didn't understand us. They fought the war they expected, not the war we gave them. Will there be more wars? A third student asked, fear evident in her voice. The teacher paused. She could lie, tell them that peace was guaranteed, but that would dishonor those who had died securing humanity's future. Probably, she admitted. There are species out there who fear us or who want what we have. Some might try to take it by force. But remember what we learned from the Krythax War. We don't want war. We will always try for peace first. But if war comes, we know how to win. And more importantly, we know why we fight. We fight for each other. For our homes. For the right to exist free and unafraid. The students were quiet, absorbing this. Finally, one asked, what happened to the Krythax? After the war? They're rebuilding, the teacher said. With our help. We defeated them, but we didn't destroy them. Some people think we should have. Some people think we were too merciful. But the leaders who ended the war believed that turning an enemy into a friend is better than creating an enemy who will hate you forever. Do the Krythax hate us? The teacher pulled up recent footage of High Commander Velshar speaking to his people. The Krythax leader stood before his parliament, advocating for continued cooperation with humanity. Some do, the teacher said. But others are learning. Learning that strength without wisdom leads to disaster. Learning that humanity won't be pushed around, but we will extend a hand to those who want peace. She looked at her students, these children who would inherit the galaxy humanity was shaping. You will live in a very different universe than your grandparents did. Humanity is no longer the new species that everyone dismisses. We're a power. That brings opportunity, but it also brings responsibility. You will have to decide what kind of power we become. Will we use our strength to protect and build? Or will we become what we fought against? The question hung in the air as the class ended. It was a question every generation would have to answer. Admiral Sarah Chen, now 73 years old, sat in her home in Colorado and watched the sunset over the mountains. She had spent 50 years in uniform, including the 1 year of war that defined her career. She carried the memories of 7 million dead. She carried the weight of decisions that had saved billions but cost billions. A reporter had asked her once if she had any regrets. Chen had thought carefully before answering. I regret that war was necessary. I regret every person who died under my command. I regret that we couldn't find a peaceful solution. But I don't regret fighting. I don't regret winning. And I don't regret showing the galaxy that humanity is not to be trifled with. Now, years later, she still held to that answer. The war had been terrible, but it had been necessary. And humanity had fought it in a way that honored their values. They had been ruthless when required, but merciful when possible. They had destroyed an enemy's military capability, but helped rebuild their civilization. They had proven they could win wars while showing they preferred peace. Chen's terminal chimed. A message from Ambassador Webb. She opened it and smiled. Webb was retiring after 20 years of diplomatic service. His farewell message to the council had been simple and powerful. Humanity came to the stars hoping for friendship. We found competition and conflict instead. We adapted. We survived. We thrived. But we never gave up on our original hope. We still want friendship. We still believe that cooperation benefits everyone. We still think the galaxy can be better than it has been, and we're willing to work with anyone who shares that vision. But know this, we will never again be dismissed or threatened. We have proven what we are capable of. Now let us prove what we aspire to be. The message to Chen included a personal note. Sarah, we did what we had to do. We saved our species. We secured our future. Now it's up to the next generation to build on that foundation. I hope they choose wisdom. I hope they remember that our strength comes not from our weapons, but from our values. And I hope they never forget that the best victory is the one you never have to fight. Chen sent back a brief reply. They'll remember, Marcus. We'll make sure they remember, because those who forget history are doomed to repeat it, and humanity has enough history to learn from. As darkness fell over Colorado, Chen thought about the future. Humanity would face more challenges, more wars probably, more species would test them, probe for weakness, try to find the limits of human capability. Some would become allies, others would become enemies. The galaxy was vast and full of competitors, each with their own agenda. But humanity would endure. They had survived ice ages and plagues, world wars and nuclear standoffs. They had nearly destroyed themselves and pulled back from the brink. They had reached for the stars and found them full of danger, and they had proven that they could survive anything the galaxy threw at them, not because they were the strongest, not because they were the smartest, but because they were adaptable, determined and willing to do whatever it took to protect their own. The Krythax had challenged humanity. They had demanded surrender. They had attacked without mercy, expecting quick victory, and they had paid with planets, pride, and power. Let the galaxy remember that lesson. Let every species that looked at humanity calculate the cost of conflict. Let them understand that humans were not harmless, had never been harmless, would never be harmless. But also let them understand that humans would rather be friends than enemies, would rather build than destroy, would rather cooperate than conquer. That was the balance humanity had to maintain. Strong enough that no one dared attack. Reasonable enough that everyone wanted to cooperate. Dangerous enough to win wars. Wise enough to prevent them. It was a difficult path to walk. But humanity had been walking difficult paths since they first stood upright on the plains of Africa. They would find their way through the stars, just as they had found their way across Earth. And if anyone challenged them again, if anyone mistook their peaceful nature for weakness, they would learn the same lesson the Krythax learned. Humanity was not harmless. They were simply choosing to be peaceful. There was a difference, and that difference would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The stars looked the same as they always had from the observatory in Houston. Olivia Martinez adjusted her telescope and checked the readings again. Something wasn't right. For 3 nights in a row, she had noticed strange movements in the outer solar system, objects that shouldn't be there. Objects that moved in ways natural bodies never would. Olivia took off her glasses and rubbed her tired eyes. At 32, she had already made a name for herself at NASA as one of their best deep space analysts. But nothing in her career had prepared her for what she was seeing now. You're still here? Alan Brooks pushed open the door to the observatory dome, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Alan had been Olivia's colleague for 5 years, and they had developed a friendship built on mutual respect and a shared love of the unknown. I can't leave, not with these readings. Olivia took the coffee gratefully. Look at this. Alan peered at the screen. His face, usually relaxed and friendly, grew serious. That's not normal orbital behavior. No, it's not. Whatever these are, they're slowing down. And they're big, Alan. Really big. Asteroids? Olivia shook her head. Asteroids don't suddenly change direction or speed. These are... I think they're ships. Alan looked at her for a long moment. You know how that sounds, right? I know exactly how it sounds, Olivia said. That's why I've triple-checked everything. I'm not wrong about this. Alan sipped his coffee, thinking. So what do? We tell someone. The military, probably. You think they'll listen? Olivia looked back at the screen, at the undeniable evidence of something massive heading directly toward Earth. They'd better. 3 days later, Olivia and Alan sat in a windowless room at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado. Across from them sat Colonel Diane Wright, commander of the Space Defense Initiative, along with several serious-looking men and women in both military uniforms and civilian suits. "Run through this one more time," Colonel Wright said. She was a stern woman with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Olivia pulled up her data on the screen. "These objects first appeared at the edge of our detection range about 2 weeks ago. At first we thought they were just anomalies in the data, but they've continued to move in a clear pattern, adjusting course in ways that natural objects simply cannot." "And you believe these are extraterrestrial vessels?" one of the civilian men asked. His badge identified him as Dr. Paul Simmons from the Department of Defense. "I believe the evidence points to that conclusion, yes," Olivia said firmly. "How many?" Colonel Wright asked. "We've identified at least 3 large objects and approximately 20 smaller ones." The room fell silent. "How long?" asked a woman in an Air Force uniform with general stars. "At their current speed, about 6 months, until they reach Earth," the general nodded. "Thank you, Dr. Martinez. Mr. Brooks, we'll take it from here." "With all due respect," Olivia said, "I'd like to remain involved. Nobody knows these readings better than I do." Colonel Wright and the general exchanged looks. "Very well," Wright said finally. "You're both being assigned to Project Sentinel, effective immediately. Security clearance is being processed as we speak." As they left the meeting, Alan whispered to Olivia, "Did we just get drafted into an alien first contact scenario?" "I think we did," she replied, feeling equal parts excitement and terror. Meanwhile, at the edge of the solar system, Admiral Victor Reese stood on the command deck of the Hegemony flagship Inevitable Conquest. The massive vessel, over 3 miles long, was the pride of the galactic Hegemony's fleet. Behind it followed 2 more battlecruisers, the Subjugation and the Dominion, along with various support craft and troop carriers. "Show me this planet," again, Reese ordered. A holographic image of Earth appeared in the center of the command deck. Reese studied it carefully. Blue oceans, green and brown landmasses, swirling white clouds. It looked peaceful, ordinary, just another world to bring under the glorious rule of the Hegemony. Science Officer Zexlar stepped forward. Zexlar was not humanoid. The Trexalian species resembled something between an insect and a reptile, with 4 arms and a body covered in iridescent scales. Despite looking alien to human eyes, Zexlar was considered quite attractive among his own kind. "Our scans indicate a technologically developing species," Zexlar reported, his voice a melodic clicking. "They call themselves humans. They've achieved nuclear fission, primitive space travel within their own system, and global communication networks. Military capability is significant by developing world standards but poses no threat to our forces." "Political structure?" Reese asked. "Fractured. Multiple nation-states with varying alliances and conflicts. No unified planetary government." Reese nodded. This was standard for worlds at this development stage. Divided, they would be easy to conquer. "The planet has abundant resources," Zexlar continued. "Particularly interesting is the remarkable biodiversity and the unusual concentration of liquid water. The Hegemony Science Division will be pleased." "Resistance assessment?" Reese asked his military strategist, Commander Valk. Valk, a tall humanoid, with pale blue skin and no hair, consulted her datapad. "Minimal to moderate, Admiral. Their most advanced weapons cannot penetrate our shields. We estimate total planetary pacification within 14 standard days." "Casualties?" "Depending on the level of resistance, between 10 to 30% of the native population." Reese nodded. Those were acceptable numbers for a conquest of this scale. The survivors would become productive members of the Hegemony, as had countless species before them. "Standard approach then," Reese decided. "We'll announce our presence when we reach their moon. Offer them the choice between peaceful submission or forced subjugation. Based on historical data of species at this development stage, they'll likely attempt resistance first. Already calculating optimal targets for the first wave," Commander Valk confirmed. Reese looked again at the blue planet, another jewel for the Hegemony's crown. Another victory for his already impressive record. "Set course for their moon," he ordered. "Standard speed." None of the hegemony officers noticed the small, sleek vessel that detached itself from the shadow of a distant moon and accelerated toward Earth, moving far faster than any hegemony ship could travel. Inside this vessel, a silver-skinned being sent an urgent message to his people, and then began preparing a different message, one intended for the unsuspecting humans. The Veil had broken their policy of non-interference only 3 times in their 50,000-year history. This would be the 4th. 2 months passed quickly. Around the world, life continued as normal for most people. Governments kept the approaching alien fleet a secret. Only a small group of military leaders, scientists, and key political figures knew the truth. Olivia Martinez had barely left the new underground facility in Colorado, where Project Sentinel had set up operations. She worked with a team of the world's best astronomers and physicists, tracking the alien ships as they moved closer to Earth. They'll reach the moon in about 4 months, Olivia told Colonel Wright during their daily briefing. Their speed has been consistent. Colonel Wright nodded, her face giving away nothing. And we still have no idea what they want? No communication yet, Alan Brooks said from across the room. He had lost weight in the past weeks, his face now thinner with dark circles under his eyes. But their course hasn't changed. They're definitely coming here. We need to prepare for the worst, said General Lena Ford, who had flown in from Washington. The president wants options on his desk by the end of the week. The mood in the room was grim. Earth's most powerful weapons seemed like toys compared to what their scan suggested about the alien ships. They had detected energy readings that made nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. What about telling the public? Olivia asked. People have a right to know. And cause global panic? Colonel Wright shook her head. Not yet. We need more information first. But fate had other plans. That night, a small object entered Earth's atmosphere, moving too fast for defense systems to track properly. It bypassed all attempts to intercept it and positioned itself in low Earth orbit. Within minutes, every electronic device on the planet, phones, televisions, computers, radios, broadcast the same message in every language. People of Earth, we come with urgent warning. The galactic hegemony approaches your world with conquest in mind. We are the Veil. We cannot intervene directly due to ancient pacts, but we offer this knowledge. You are not as defenseless as they believe. Chaos erupted worldwide. Governments scrambled to respond. Religious groups proclaimed the end times. Some people panicked, emptying store shelves and fleeing cities. Others simply waited for more information, unsure what to believe. In the underground facility, Olivia and the Project Sentinel team watched the message repeat on every screen. Looks like secrecy is off the table, Alan said quietly. Colonel Wright was already on a secure line to Washington. General Ford stood by, her face pale. The president is addressing the nation in an hour, Colonel Wright announced when she hung up. All world leaders are doing the same. We need to find that ship. It didn't take long. The vessel, much smaller than the approaching hegemony fleet, had taken position near the International Space Station. A second message came through. We request a meeting with Earth's leaders. The space station you have in orbit would be a suitable location. Time is short. Within 24 hours, as the world below tried to come to terms with the reality of alien contact, a small team prepared to travel to the ISS. The team included representatives from major world powers, the United States, China, Russia, the European Union, and India. Colonel Susan Porter was selected to lead the American delegation. At 41, she had combat experience from multiple conflicts and held a doctorate in xenobiology, a field that had been theoretical until now. Remember, we know nothing about either of these alien groups, Susan told her team as they prepared for launch. The Veil may be warning us about the hegemony, but that doesn't automatically make them our friends. The journey to the ISS took place under unprecedented security. When they arrived, the 6 astronauts already aboard the station greeted them with nervous smiles. It's been docked at the new port for 6 hours, Commander Rick Gomez told them, pointing toward the eastern side of the station. No movement, no communication since the global broadcast. Susan nodded. Let's not keep them waiting. The alien vessel had attached itself perfectly to the station's docking system, despite it not being designed for anything but Earth spacecraft. The door between the station and the ship opened smoothly. Standing on the other side was a being, unlike anything humans had ever seen. It was humanoid in shape, 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, but its skin was a metallic silver that seemed to flow like liquid. It had no hair, and its eyes were large, solid black orbs that reflected light. Strangely, it wore simple blue-gray clothing that resembled a uniform. "I am Sentinel Kier of the Veil," the being said, its voice surprisingly human-like. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Susan stepped forward. "Colonel Susan Porter, United States Air Force. These are representatives from other Earth nations." Kier nodded. "I understand your caution and confusion. Let me explain why I am here." They moved to the station's conference area. The representatives sat on one side of the table, Kier on the other. "The galactic hegemony has existed for over 3,000 years, Kier began. "They have conquered thousands of worlds and species. Their philosophy is simple. All sentient life should serve their vision of order and progress. Those who resist are crushed." "And the Veil?" asked the Chinese representative, Dr. Lin Wei. "What is your interest in our survival?" Kier's expression was difficult to read on his alien face. "We believe in autonomy and potential. The hegemony expands through force. We seek balance." "Why can't you help us directly?" Susan asked. "Your technology clearly surpasses theirs." "Ancient agreements limit direct intervention. The galaxy has survived terrible wars that nearly destroyed all life. The agreements prevent such conflicts from happening again. So you'll just watch as they destroy us?" The Russian representative, Colonel Petrov, asked angrily. "I did not say we cannot help," Kier replied calmly. "I said we cannot intervene directly. There is a difference." He placed a small crystal on the table. It glowed with a soft blue light. "This contains information about hegemony technology, tactics, and weaknesses. Their ships are powerful, but not invincible. Their soldiers are well trained, but not unbeatable." Susan studied the alien carefully. "Why would they be vulnerable to us at all? From what we've observed, their technology is centuries beyond ours. The hegemony conquers through overwhelming force and fear. They expect no significant resistance from worlds at your development stage. This arrogance is their greatest weakness." Kier leaned forward. "They do not adapt well to unexpected situations." "And you think we can provide the unexpected?" Susan asked. For the first time, Kier's face formed what might have been a smile. "Your species has remarkable potential. Throughout the galaxy, humans are known for one quality above all." "What's that?" Susan asked. "Unpredictability. You create solutions no other species would consider. Sometimes foolish, sometimes brilliant, but always unexpected." Kier gestured to the crystal. "With this knowledge and your natural adaptability, you have a chance." "A chance," Susan repeated. "Not a guarantee." "There are no guarantees in war, Colonel Porter. But without this information, you have no chance at all." As the meeting continued deep into the night on Earth below, nations that had been enemies for generations began unprecedented cooperation. Factories converted to war production. Military forces prepared for a threat they could barely comprehend, and Admiral Reese, watching from the edge of the solar system, received troubling news. "A Veil ship?" he asked, his voice sharp with surprise. Commander Valk nodded. "Our long-range scans confirmed it. They've made contact with the humans." Reese's expression darkened. The Veil had been a thorn in the hegemony's side for millennia, always just within the bounds of the ancient agreements, never breaking them outright. "Increase our speed," he ordered. "We need to reach Earth before the Veil can interfere further." The game had changed. The easy conquest Reese had anticipated now seemed much less certain. The next 2 months were the most united time in human history. Countries that had been enemies for generations now worked together against a common threat. The crystal Kier had given them contained valuable information about hegemony technology and tactics. Scientists and engineers around the world worked day and night to develop defenses. Susan Porter had been promoted to general, and now led Earth's unified defense efforts from the new Global Defense Headquarters beneath the Rocky Mountains. The facility buzzed with activity as military personnel and scientists from dozens of nations worked side by side. "The crystal has revealed another weakness in their communication systems," said Dr. Olivia Martinez, now heading the science division. She pointed to a complex diagram on the main screen. "Their ships use a specific frequency range we might be able to disrupt." Susan studied the information. "Can we build something to exploit this?" Alan Brooks, who had become the lead engineer for the defense project, nodded. "We're already working on it. If we can disrupt their communications, their fleet won't be able to coordinate attacks." "What about their weapons?" asked General Wei from the Chinese military. "Their energy shields operate on predictable patterns," Alan explained. "They're designed to stop high-energy weapons like their own, but they might be vulnerable to simpler kinetic attacks, physical projectiles fired at the right moment when the shields cycle. So our primitive weapons might actually work better than trying to copy their advanced technology," Susan said thoughtfully. "Exactly," Olivia agreed. "They expect us to either surrender or try to fight them with nuclear weapons, which their shields can easily block. They don't expect us to understand their technology well enough to find weaknesses." Keir had returned to his ship after the meeting on the space station, but remained in Earth orbit. He provided additional information when asked, but maintained that the Veil could not directly intervene in the coming battle. Meanwhile, in a secret facility beneath the Pacific Ocean, a special project was underway. Dr. Sam Harris, formerly a video game developer before being recruited for his unique way of thinking, led a small team working on what they called Project Lazarus. "The Hegemony's ships are heavily automated," Sam explained to Susan during a secure video call. "Their systems are advanced, but they follow certain protocols. We think we might be able to create a virus that could infiltrate their network." "A virus?" Susan asked. "Like in a computer?" "Similar, but much more complex. If we can get it into even one of their systems, it might spread throughout their fleet. We could potentially turn their own ships against them." Susan looked impressed. "How close are you?" Sam rubbed his tired eyes. "We've made progress, but we need more time, and we need a way to deliver it to their systems." "Keep working," Susan told him. "This might be our ace in the hole." Around the world, other preparations continued. The satellite network was modified according to Veil specifications, not for attacks, but for something else entirely. Factories that once made cars now produced specialized electromagnetic pulse generators designed to affect hegemony technology. Regular citizens were also preparing. Unlike previous wars where civilians were merely victims, this time everyone had a role to play. People modified everyday technology, from cell phones to microwave ovens, to disrupt hegemony communications if ground forces landed. The hegemony, fleet now moving faster than before, had crossed the orbit of Mars. Admiral Reese watched the approaching blue planet on his view screen. "Status report," he demanded. "All systems optimal," Commander Valk replied. "The human planet continues preparations, but nothing that poses a significant threat. They appear to be fortifying their military bases and moving some populations to underground shelters. And the Veil ship? Still in orbit. No direct interventions detected." Reese frowned. The Veil were clever. They knew exactly how far they could go without breaking the ancient agreements. Providing information was allowed. Direct military assistance was not. "They've had 2 months with Veil assistance," Reese said. "Adjust our approach. We'll bypass their moon and move directly to orbital position. No announcements, no warnings. Begin the attack immediately upon arrival." "Yes, Admiral," Valk said, making notes on her datapad. "Targets have already been selected. Their major military installations and government centers will be eliminated in the first wave. And dispatch scouts ahead," Reese added. "I want to know exactly what they're planning." 3 hegemony scout ships detached from the main fleet and accelerated toward Earth. Smaller and faster than the battle cruisers, they were designed to gather intelligence and remain undetected. But Earth was watching. 3 small vessels approaching, Olivia reported, studying the advanced detection systems they had developed with Veil guidance. Based on their size and speed, they matched the profile of hegemony scout ships. They're coming to see what we've been up to, Susan said. Let's give them something to look at, but not everything. She turned to the communications officer. Implement Protocol Mirage. Let them see what we want them to see. Across Earth, certain activities became more visible, while others were carefully hidden. Military bases openly displayed conventional weapons and defenses, tanks, aircraft, missile systems. Meanwhile, the truly dangerous developments were concealed in underground facilities or disguised as civilian infrastructure. The scout ships entered Earth orbit, their sophisticated sensors scanning the planet below. They observed military movements, analyzed defense systems, and monitored communications. After completing their survey, they returned to the main fleet. The humans are preparing defenses, the lead scout reported to Admiral Reese. But nothing beyond what we expected. Conventional weapons, some nuclear capability, primitive electronic countermeasures. Reese nodded, satisfied. They're putting on a brave show, but they must know it's hopeless. There is one curious development, the scout added. They've been modifying their satellite network, purpose unknown. Observation capability, most likely, Reese said dismissively. Prepare the battle cruisers, will arrive in 10 days. This conquest will proceed as planned. Back on Earth, Susan received confirmation that the scout ships had departed. Did they see what we wanted them to see? She asked her team. Yes, General, replied the head of counterintelligence. They detected our obvious preparations but missed the key elements. Susan allowed herself a small smile. Good. We'll only get one chance to surprise them. She turned to face the global command team gathered in the control room. Representatives from every major military power on Earth stood before her, waiting for her words. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 10 days until the hegemony fleet arrives. Everything we've worked for comes down to this. They expect us to be primitive, disorganized, and easy to conquer. They don't expect us to understand their technology or to have prepared specifically for them. She gestured to the main screen, showing the approaching hegemony fleet. But we're ready for them. Humanity has never been more united or more determined. We will not go quietly. We will not surrender our world. The room filled with resolute nods and determined faces. Earth was as ready as it could be. In his ship orbiting above, Sentinel Kier observed the humans' preparations with interest. The Veil had helped hundreds of species over the millennia, but few had shown such creativity or adaptability. Most tried to copy hegemony technology and failed. The humans had taken a different approach entirely. Kier sent a final message to his people. The test begins soon. These humans, they are unlike the others. I believe they may actually succeed where all others have failed. The reply came swiftly. For the sake of the galaxy, we hope you are right. The day of arrival came. People around the world watched the skies, some in fear, others in defiance. Many had moved to underground shelters. Cities stood half empty. But there was no panic, no riots. Humanity faced its greatest threat with surprising calm and unity. In the Global Defense Headquarters, Susan Porter received reports from monitoring stations worldwide. The modified satellite network tracked the hegemony fleet as it passed the moon's orbit. They're moving faster than expected, Olivia said, her eyes fixed on the main screen. They'll be in position for orbital strikes in less than 2 hours. Susan nodded. They're not following standard protocol, no announcement, no demand for surrender. They're coming in hot. They don't think they need to give us a chance, Alan said. They expect this to be easy. Susan turned to the communications officer. Activate all defense systems, alert every military base, it's time. Around the world, soldiers moved to their positions. Civilians activated the devices they had been provided. In orbit, the satellite network prepared for its secret purpose. On the hegemony flagship, Admiral Reese watched Earth grow larger on the view screen. It was a beautiful world, rich in resources and life. Soon, it would be another jewel in the hegemony's vast collection. Battle stations, he ordered. Prepare weapon systems for the first wave of targets. Commander Valk stood beside him, tablet in hand. All systems ready, Admiral. Target coordinates locked. Their primitive defenses? Reese asked. Some movement, of aircraft and ground forces. Nothing of concern. Their satellite network has been partially activated, likely for observation purposes. Reese smiled. Begin the attack. Target their military command centers first, then government facilities. The three massive battle cruisers moved into Earth orbit. Gun ports opened along their sides, revealing weapons that could level cities with a single shot. Energy signatures detected, reported Olivia from Earth. They're charging weapons. Activate the shield, Susan ordered. Around the world, thousands of devices activated simultaneously. The satellite network pulsed with energy. A wave of invisible force spread around the planet, creating a field unlike anything humans had built before. Fire, ordered Admiral Reese. Brilliant beams of energy shot from the hegemony ships toward Earth. But as they reached the atmosphere, something unexpected happened. The beams scattered, their energy dispersing harmlessly into the upper atmosphere. What happened? Reese demanded. Unknown, Admiral, said a confused weapons officer. The energy beams, they didn't penetrate. Impossible, Reese growled. Fire again, full power. On Earth, Susan watched the readouts with cautious hope. The shield is holding. Kier's specifications worked. The shield wasn't a physical barrier, but an energy field that disrupted hegemony weapons specifically. It couldn't stop physical objects, but it rendered their energy weapons useless against the planet. Launch the fighters, Susan ordered. Begin Phase 2. Across the globe, aircraft took off from military bases. They weren't the sleek jets people were used to seeing. These were new designs built in the last 2 months using Veil information. They looked awkward, almost ugly, but they contained technology specifically designed to counter hegemony defenses. Admiral, Earth forces are launching aircraft, reported Commander Valk, her voice tinged with surprise. Reese frowned. Primitive fighters are no match for our ships. Dispatch our combat drones to eliminate them. Hundreds of sleek hegemony fighters, deployed from the battle cruisers racing toward Earth's atmosphere to meet the approaching human aircraft. They've launched fighters, Olivia reported to Susan. Just as expected. Good, Susan replied. Let's see if our modifications work. The human fighters reached the upper atmosphere just as the hegemony drones arrived. The alien craft were faster, more maneuverable, and armed with superior weapons. By all logic, the Earth planes should have been destroyed instantly, but as the hegemony drones fired their weapons, something strange happened. Their targeting system suddenly failed. Shots went wide, missing the human aircraft completely. The human planes, meanwhile, fired simple missiles, not energy weapons, but physical projectiles with conventional explosives. The first wave of hegemony drones exploded in flames. What is happening? Reese shouted, watching his fighters fall. How are they doing this? Unknown, Admiral, Valk responded, her calm facade cracking. Their aircraft are emitting some kind of jamming signal that's affecting our targeting systems. And our drone shields. They're designed to stop energy weapons, not physical projectiles. Reese's face darkened with rage. The Veil. They've given the humans knowledge of our technology. He turned to his executive officer. Deploy ground troops. If we can't bomb them from orbit, we'll take their world the hard way. On Earth, Susan received reports of the successful first engagement. Our fighters took minimal losses, the jamming technology worked. But they're preparing dropships, Olivia warned, pointing to new readings. They're sending ground forces. Susan nodded. We expected this. Alert all ground teams. Activate the local defense grid. Hundreds of hegemony troop carriers descended toward Earth, targeting major cities and military bases. Each carried 50 soldiers in advanced battle armor, armed with weapons that could reduce a human to ash in seconds. The first wave landed in North America. As the alien soldiers emerged from their ships, they expected to face either a terrified population or conventional military forces they could easily overwhelm. Instead, they found empty streets. Their sensors detected humans nearby, but not in the open. Spread out, ordered the hegemony commander. Find their leaders and eliminate resistance. The troops moved through the abandoned streets of Washington, D.C., weapons ready. Suddenly, all their communications went dead. Their armor systems flickered. From buildings, sewers, and hidden bunkers, humans emerged. They weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. Many were civilians armed with strange devices cobbled together from everyday technology. Others were military personnel with modified weapons. The hegemony troops fired, but many of their weapons malfunctioned. The humans' devices were broadcasting signals on exactly the right frequencies to disrupt their systems. Those alien weapons that did work found their targets taking cover, fighting in ways the hegemony had never encountered before. Similar scenes played out around the world. The hegemony's superior technology was being countered by human ingenuity and unpredictability. Back in orbit, Admiral Reese received increasingly desperate reports from his ground forces. "This is impossible," he muttered. "They're primitives. How are they doing this?" "Admiral," Valk said, her voice now openly concerned. "Something is happening to our systems." The lights on the bridge flickered. Screens displayed error messages. "Our network has been breached," reported a frantic systems officer. "Some kind of intrusion program is spreading through our ships." Project Lazarus had been activated. When the hegemony troops landed, they had unknowingly carried the human-created virus into their own network. "Shut down all systems," Reese ordered. "Isolate the flagship's computers." But it was too late. The virus spread from ship to ship, exploiting weaknesses in the hegemony's network that the veil had revealed. Critical systems began failing throughout the fleet. In the Pacific Ocean facility, Sam Harris watched his screens with growing excitement. "It's working. The virus is in their system." On the main hegemony cruiser, chaos erupted as life support systems failed and artificial gravity fluctuated. Admiral Reese clung to his command chair, watching his perfect conquest crumble around him. For the first time in his long career, he faced the unthinkable: defeat at the hands of a supposedly primitive species. And with that realization came an emotion Reese had never experienced before: fear. For 3 days, the battle raged in space and on Earth. The hegemony fleet struggled against the virus that infected their systems. On the ground, their soldiers faced resistance unlike anything they had encountered in thousands of years of conquest. The Global Defense Headquarters, Susan Porter hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours. She studied the latest reports with bloodshot eyes. Their main cruiser is still operational, but the other two have lost most of their critical systems, Olivia reported. "Our fighters have destroyed over 60% of their smaller craft." "And on the ground?" Susan asked. Alan pointed to a world map covered with glowing dots representing battle zones. "We're holding our own. They've taken some ground in major cities, but their advance has stalled. The distributed defense networks are working better than we expected." The distributed defense was perhaps humanity's most creative strategy. Instead of relying on centralized military forces, they had armed millions of civilians with simple devices that could disrupt hegemony technology. The aliens faced resistance everywhere they went. Not organized military units they could easily target, but ordinary people fighting for their homes in ways the hegemony couldn't predict. "What about Project Lazarus?" Susan asked. Sam Harris appeared on a video screen looking exhausted but triumphant. "The virus has reached their command systems. It's giving us partial control of some of their ships, including weapons and navigation. But they're fighting back, creating countermeasures. We need to act fast before they lock us out." Susan nodded and turned to the global command team. "It's time for our final play. Prepare Operation Checkmate." "That's risky," Alan warned. "If it fails, we lose our advantage. If we wait, they'll recover," Susan replied firmly. "We strike now, while they're vulnerable." On the hegemony flagship, Admiral Reese fought to maintain control of his fleet. Emergency systems had prevented a complete shutdown, but many functions remained compromised. "Status report," he demanded. Commander Valk, her uniform now torn and dirty from fighting electrical fires on the bridge, consulted her tablet. "The subjugation and dominion remain heavily compromised. Our ground forces report continued resistance. We've lost nearly 40% of our troops." Reese slammed his fist on his command chair. "How? How is this happening? They're primitives." "The virus in our systems," Valk began, "is unlike anything we've encountered," Reese finished. "It adapts, it learns, This is beyond human capability. Lee, Vale must have given them more than just information, Valk suggested. Reese shook his head. The Vale wouldn't break the agreement so blatantly. His eyes widened with sudden understanding. Unless the humans developed this themselves, using only Vale information as a starting point. Before Valk could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Multiple human vessels approaching, reported the sensor officer. And our own fighters. They're turning against us. The Project Lazarus virus had gained enough control of the hegemonies, smaller ships to turn them against the flagship. Meanwhile, Earth's fighters launched a coordinated attack. Evasive maneuvers, Reese ordered. Divert all power to shields. But the virus had affected their navigation systems. The massive cruiser responded sluggishly, unable to avoid the incoming attack. Earth's fighters fired their missiles, not at the ship's hull but at precise points where the shields were weakest, coordinates provided by the Vale. The hegemony's own compromised fighters did the same. Explosions rocked the flagship. Fires broke out on multiple decks. Life support began to fail. Admiral, Valk said, her voice now calm with the clarity of inevitable defeat. We should consider withdrawing. Reese stared at her in shock. In 300 years of service to the hegemony, he had never retreated, never lost. The very suggestion was unthinkable, but as he looked at the view screen, at the burning wrecks of his other cruisers, at the swarms of Earth fighters and his own compromised vessels closing in, he knew she was right. Prepare a communication to Earth forces, he said finally, his voice hollow. Request terms. On Earth, Susan received the message with stunned silence. The hegemony was asking for terms of surrender, not Earth's, but their own. They're actually giving up, Alan said in disbelief. Susan turned to the communications officer. Tell them we accept their surrender. All hegemony forces must withdraw from Earth ground and orbit. Their commander will meet with us to formalize terms. 6 hours later, a small hegemony shuttle landed at a military base in Switzerland, chosen as neutral territory. Admiral Reese, once proud and confident, now walked with the stiff posture of someone unused to defeat. Susan met him in a hastily prepared conference room accompanied by military leaders from around the world. You fought effectively, Reese said, clearly struggling with the admission. The hegemony has never encountered a species like yours before. We fight harder when we're fighting for our home, Susan replied. Reese studied her for a moment. The question is, what will you do now? The hegemony will not forget this defeat. They will return with a larger force, unless, Susan asked, sensing an offer coming. Unless we reach an agreement, a true peace, not just a temporary ceasefire. Susan leaned forward. We're listening. Reese placed a data crystal on the table. This contains star charts marking all known hegemony, worlds, plus allies and enemies. Consider it a peace offering. Susan picked up the crystal. And what happens when we visit these worlds? Reese's alien features formed what might have been a smile. That, General Porter, is what terrifies the Vale. Later, after Reese had returned to his damaged flagship and the hegemony fleet had withdrawn from Earth orbit under watchful eyes, Susan met with Sentinel Kier one final time. The hegemony is retreating, she said. We won, thanks to your help. Kier nodded. You would have found a way even without our information. That is what makes humans interesting. Susan studied the alien's unreadable face. Reese said something curious. He said the Vale fears what might happen when humans begin exploring the galaxy. Is that true? Kier was silent for a long moment. The Vale does not fear humans. We fear what any species might become with too much power and too little wisdom. The hegemony became conquerors. Others became isolationists or fanatics. And what do you think will become? Susan asked. That is the question that has divided the Vale Council, Kier admitted. Some believe you will bring balance to a galaxy long dominated by the hegemony. Others fear you will simply replace one empire with another. He gestured to the stars visible through the window. Your potential exceeds any species we have encountered in 50,000 years. Your adaptability, your creativity, your determination, these qualities make you uniquely suited to thrive among the stars. That sounds like a compliment, Susan said. It is an observation, Keir replied, and a warning. Great potential brings great responsibility. As Keir's ship departed Earth for the last time, humanity looked to the stars with new eyes. They had faced the most powerful empire in the galaxy and survived. More than survived. They had won. The data crystal contained not just star charts but technology that would accelerate human development by centuries. Within a year, the first human ships capable of interstellar travel would be ready. The galaxy that had dismissed Earth as just another primitive world to be conquered was about to meet humanity on equal terms, and nothing would ever be the same again.